Hi folks, welcome to the Ask the R podcast, where today we've got Raquel from MAR Design. Raquel, welcome to the Ask the R podcast. So I'll give you a brief little intro, and then I'll let you run with it. But Raquel runs MAR Design, which is a design studio. She's a qualified architect, but she's got a really interesting little twist on this, which I think would be a fantastic fit for our listeners. So I'll bring you on, Raquel. I think what we should start with, obviously you help property developers and designers sort of up their interior game, but I'll let you give the elevator pitch. So over to you.
Hi, Matt. Thank you so much for having me. So I'm Raquel. I run MAR Design. We are an architecture and interior design studio, and we work with property developers and investors mainly. And what we do is that we create homes and spaces that people absolutely love. And because of that, our clients achieve higher profits, higher valuations, better rent rolls, and they attract better buyers and tenants.
Okay, and that sounds fantastic. So, is there like a geographical area that you serve specifically, or will you go sort of anywhere in the UK or beyond?
Yeah, we go quite national because depends on the strategy that our clients use or work with. So, for example, on the HMO side, it's pretty much anywhere in the country. And then in terms of the residential developments, we do tend to work more like London and then down south, just because of, property values and what people can get out of property itself. So that tends to be more or less our geography of our business. But I mean, nothing saying if there's an amazing project up north for a residential project that we wouldn't do it, right?
Yeah. Well, we'll bring you up to Scotland. I don't think there's very many HMOs in Shetland or Orkney, so we probably couldn't do anything there. But actually, hilariously, I know we've discussed that there's obviously overlap between our businesses, and we'll come on to that. But most of our clients tend to be in the kind of London area, actually, and within the M25, because that's where the chimney pots are. That's where the people are, isn't it? So that's where the opportunity sits. So talk to me a little bit about the journey. How did you get to where you are now? Because what you've done that I think is extremely smart is that you've niched down and you're very, very clear on who you want to work with, and that always interests me in business, because I find that businesses that are generalist in the early days really struggle to get moving. So take me back to the early days. How have you got from where you were to where you are now? What does that look like?
So I'm Portuguese. I am fully qualified architect and I qualified in Portugal. And I thought it would be a brilliant idea to go back to China and work there.
Hang
And
on, I
see,
have to stop you there. Back to China.
yeah,
So what's the
maybe I
link
should go
between?
even earlier days.
Right, okay. I was going to say, what's the link between Portugal and China?
Yeah,
My
so
geography's crap, but they're a long way apart, aren't they?
yeah. So China, when I was 4 years old, I moved to China because my father
Wow.
is an army officer, and so he was sent there, and we went, with my dad. So I did my primary school over there, and I still know a little bit of Cantonese, which is quite
Wow.
surprising, right?
Yeah.
And so I experienced China and growing up in China for 5 years. And I always had that little thing like, how would it be to go back as an adult and
Mm.
experience in a completely different way? So I thought, well, I'm finishing uni. I need a bit of excitement, experience, being exposed to different ways, different cultures. And I think this is exactly what I want to do. So I reached out to several studios and I got an internship there for 1 year. And so ended up staying 8 years there because I absolutely loved it.
Wow.
And in China, life is very, it's like you're always in fast speed mode all the time. So I am very grateful that I was involved with amazing clients like MGM, like STDM, who is all of the Lawrence Ho's and like Sunleo's of the world casinos. So we did a lot of work for that. We did a bit of hospitality as well, F&B, and everything in designing for those types of ambiances is about the guest experience and how people feel and how can people stay longer in a
Yeah.
space, especially on the casino side, because everyone wants them to stay and play more and more and more, so that then they can be picked from the different areas of the casino and going to the more higher end spaces where they, it's all about the experience as well. So that is something that it's not very usual, but it is amazing. It's super cool. It's only always there's always a budget on those projects, but it's a bit of like a different budget, because here we stick to the budget. There they're always saying or looking into opportunities of how can they actually get people more into their spaces, so they can, if there's something that they find that is going to really transform, they'll make it happen.
And I'm guessing they're probably a little bit more educated and focused over around the sort of the lifetime value of the customer as well. So you touched on the beautiful design leading to people wanting to spend more time there, etc., etc. So I guess they're probably not just looking at the room rate; they're looking at what that person's going to spend in terms of meals in the casinos, etc., etc. So that when you link that through to what you do now, I can see how that would be incredibly valuable. So you had the time out in China there working on some super cool projects, and then you moved back to the UK, did you? Or
Yes, then I moved to the UK. I had an opportunity to work for a design studio where I was for 3 years and a half. I think it was almost 4 years. We were working on the Trinity Square, which is the Four Seasons Hotel just behind Tower Hill.
yeah,
And it was a massive project because it's a listed building. Every place you dug something, there was like a Roman something there. So it's like everyone stops, let's see what we're going to do about this. The learnings on that project were just like unbelievable as well. Very different pace than in China, but amazing. I've never had the opportunity in China to work with a heritage building, and that was the first time, and
yeah.
it's actually quite mind blowing. All the different aspects that you get into that project alone, and then from there I moved on. I still continued on hospitality with a few projects, and then I moved on to more the higher end, super net worth individuals, private homes. So I stayed probably around 3 years on that world, which we worked as well with developers doing Chelsea Barracks, One Blackfriars, and that's a different type. It's still very much towards the buyer experience, but it's a very different way to approach the same beast, let's call it this
Yeah,
way.
yeah,
So, yeah.
absolutely. And that career trajectory and that diversity of not only buildings but people as well that you've worked with has probably set you, I'm guessing, in really good stead for what you're doing now, which I'm guessing at times can be a bit of a roller coaster. So when did you start Mar Design?
2021.
Right.
But I started attending networking events and kind of being in the space, and just out of curiosity. It wasn't for creating a business or any of that. It's
Yeah.
just I genuinely wanted to learn the strategies. How can people grow and build wealth through property? And then, as you do on only all these networkings, they start asking you, what do you do? Da, 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 da. And then suddenly people started asking me, well, I have this project, would you like to have a look, and how can you help me? And I thought, well, I love what I do, but there's a gap in the market where there's loads of design studios for the higher end prime, super prime, but there's no one that is really honing in on doing it properly on the more smaller medium projects, as
Yeah.
in properly, not just like selecting a paint colors and fluffing some cushions. And so that was when I thought, well, maybe this is the time for me to shift because I have all of this experience. And so off we go. COVID hit, right? So I still kept on virtually networking, and I got my first client. And then I just built a pipeline, and I jumped from being on a corporate career into fully into more design. Just me first at the beginning. Now we're five. And it's been, yes, a roller coaster, and especially on how to create amazing spaces with almost no budget. But I'm always up for a challenge, so why not?
It's interesting that you mentioned that because that was kind of going to be my next question. So I think a lot of what you do now is HMOs, isn't it? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong there. And my perception, and traditionally the perception is there, it's kind of a stack 'em high, sell 'em cheap, an area. So I'm guessing that the increasing rent roll, increasing the valuations of those properties, and actually making them as marketable as you possibly can do without spending a fortune, that must be a real challenge.
Yes, it is. It can be a real challenge, but I think it's good to also have expectations from day one, right? From the client side and from our side as well, because we can propose everything that it's beautiful, but it has to work for the purpose of the strategy that the developer, the investor is doing, right?
Yeah.
There's no sense in putting marble tops on a HMO. It's just, it's silly. It's a silly spend, right? But there are other products that you can use that can work. And
Yeah.
sometimes what I say to clients is when they come to us and they're like, "Oh, I'm not so sure if I have all the budget to do this, to invest in design, da da da." I'm like, "Fine, but at least let's get the foundational stuff ready, which is all the space planning and what you can actually maximize on a property to make your tenant's life much easier so that then they want to stay and they just don't want to move 6 months afterwards unless there's something in their life that they have to move." And that's what happens with our projects most of the times. I mean, 90%, 99% of the times, the clients, the tenants stay, and they only move because there's something really in their lives that makes them move. And also the investors, they do achieve the highest rents in any of the areas that we kind of touch.
Which is fantastic, and we'll obviously share details on how you can contact Raquel at the end of the podcast, because I think I think what you bring is the missing link. We obviously work much earlier in the planning timeline, so we're working with people that are looking to develop HMOs, that are looking to perhaps do some external works or some landscaping or something like that, and they're very, very focused quite often on the fabric of the building and getting the planning through and all that kind of stuff. But I don't think they actually think very far ahead in terms of what they need to do to the interior to maximise the return. Is that something that you see as well?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think but to be honest, there has been a shift since I started my design, and now there has been a shift in the market. People are getting more aware of what design can help them. And I do say design as a broad thing because obviously when we start working on, planning applications, permitted development, etc., etc. But we do bring everything that you're going to need at the end, let's say that, at that early stages. And I think that's what people are starting to understand. And they do see, Instagram and LinkedIn, they see all these beautiful properties
Yeah.
and they're like, "Oh my God, I want my property to look the same." But to do that is not just, splash a paint of color. You really need to hone in on how the space works to then get the results that you see on Instagram, and that, financially gives them more. So,
Yeah.
but things are changing. I do think that there's still quite a bit split between developers that are very design led and quite, open to explore the possibility. And there are still a few ones that are a bit more skeptical. But it's fine, it takes time with anything. So we just need
I
to
think
keep going. And
from my uneducated perspective on, because my interior design skills are very limited, as my other half would tell you, the, I just don't think that people that are looking for that type of accommodation, they just won't accept magnolia walls and grey carpets anymore. It's not what they. You've got to be extremely visionary to see how you can turn that space into something nice. And also, quite often, I guess, potentially in these circumstances, you know, the tenants or even the buyer may not have the funds to do that themselves anyway. So, what does the pipeline look like? So, if somebody wants to work with you, talk me through what that process looks like. So I'm guessing that a potential lead or a potential customer would come to you and they would say something like, I know I need to do something with the interior of my property to maximise the returns that I can get for it. What does that journey look like? What are the hurdles that they need to cross with you?
yeah, so how we normally work is if we're going to be the architects on the project and do all of the planning applications or permitted development or whatever it is that we're doing. So we start early on working on the space planning internally and see what we can maximize, extend, convert, etc., etc. At the same time, we work with identifying what is the target market, because there's no point in, if you're targeting professionals, doing something that is, I don't know, for students. It just doesn't work. It's pointless. So we need to really hone in on what is your target market, and then we can, together with a plan, create what we call a concept design, and that is like a series of images that will inform the design and give you a bit of like direction and clarity of what we're doing, and that aligns with the target and the plan itself. Then if we're not working with, or if we're not the architects on the project, we can work with your architect very early on the space planning, so that when you submit or when they submit the plans for planning, then everything is locked. Because to me, there's no worse feeling than someone has submitted planning and then we got the plans and we look at it and we're like, oh my god, we could have changed this and this, because there's so much you can do. You can do, but it's not like you can't go crazy and rewrite the story, right? So yeah. So once that's locked in, we have our concept, we have the idea of what we're going to do overall in the property. Then we move on to what we call the design development. And the design development is pretty much the same way and the same level of detail that we look into the space planning. We look into designing every single wall of the property. And if you have, like, especially on HMOs, if you have headboards with effects, with beading, with paneling, etc., that needs to be designed the same way, with dimensions, with setting outs for sockets, switches, etc., so that whenever a tenant goes into that space, they're like, okay, I'm in bed, I'm just, going to reach out to switch off the light and everything goes off. So little details like that. Or for example, everyone loves to have a big mirror in their HMOs. Wonderful. But have you thought that, for example, if a tenant is a lady and they are drying their hair, they need to actually plug the hair dryer close to the mirror? I mean, these are little details, but it's the little details that actually make a difference in the space. So those are the things that we do. So we look into designing every single wall. We look into the lighting schemes, the small power schemes, specifying every finish you might possibly imagine. So your floors, your walls, your tiles, backsplashes, etc., etc. From that, then we move into the FF&E, which is everything to do with furniture, art, cushions, throws, etc., etc. That is also specified according to the budget that we have previously agreed with the client. To give you an indication, I'm saying this in terms of HMOs because it's very relatable. A realistic budget per room is starting at 1,200 per room. That's realistic. You can go lower, but you won't get the quality, you won't get the look. And it's just, I feel in my experience that it doesn't look, rooms look incomplete. So just as a reference for your audience, start with 1,200K in mind for each room. There's some bigger, some smaller, so then it kind of evens out.
That's actually much lower than I thought it would be. Actually,
Yeah,
it would be. I thought it would be higher than that. I mean, just because this space that I'm sat in at the moment, I mean, you can tell because of this over here. But if the camera was round a little bit more, it would look like my living room. But it's actually a very generic, very boring office building. And we put a sofa in it, shelves, tables, a couple of second-hand chairs, the wall in behind me, and things. And I think probably that came to about 800 or 900 quid, and that's just a tiny little space. So
yeah, but let me clarify. This is just for furniture, for artwork, for
right,
cushions, and for
yeah,
throws. It's not for the overall, let's say, envelope of the building, because that you do on quantities. You don't you or square meterage. You don't really do per room. I'm just yeah. This is just an
yes,
indication on the furniture
yeah,
side. And then what we do, some designers they do like CGIs at the beginning of the project. I'm a firm believer that CGIs must be done once everything is agreed, because then you can actually use the CGIs that we produce and put it on your marketing. So we have clients that now we finished last week a set of CGIs. They're already putting it on spare room. The property is not finished, but it's creating traction in the market, and they already have some people lining up to go and see the property. Yes, they won't see the property fully complete, but they have the expectation. And the
yeah,
funny fact is that sometimes what happens is that people think that it's a con, it's a scam.
right,
So they see the CGI and they're like, oh my God, it can't be this good. And they actually go to the property and it's a like for like with everything that they have in the room. So that's, to me, it's a much easier way to already start positioning any property, much, above and beyond all the other competition.
and that is going to become so valuable as we move forwards in 2026 and beyond, because I'm sure you're aware of all the tools that are out there
Yeah.
now in terms of digitally converting a room with apps on your phone and using AI and all this kind of stuff. And people are going to get fed up with that very quickly, and they're going to crave real genuine experiences. So I think when the marketing material matches with the reality, I think you're onto a winner there, because that forms a level of trust that perhaps wouldn't be there. I mean, we've all been we've all been into mainstream house builders show homes where the sofas are like 30% smaller. I don't know where they buy them from, and the beds are like 20% smaller than the real world. And you think, oh, this looks lovely, and then you go to put your own bed in there and your own sofa in there, and it doesn't bloody fit. So
No, yeah, I think you kind of need to be realistic. So the same way this is done for an HMO, but this exact same process we do for like any other design. Unless a client doesn't want to really have any furniture. But even so, if they don't have furniture but they still require the CGIs, we go through the process anyway, and we actually put real live furniture that looks really good, and it will work in the space as well. So it's I think it's how let's call it an ethical way of designing. So
yeah,
you really need to design for what you're promising, and not just putting up some beautiful images that you can go to AI, and it's a beautiful concept and an idea, but it's not the reality.
absolutely. People want to imagine themselves in the space, don't they? And if they've looked at the CGIs and then they've gone there and it is as similar as it possibly can be, then you're already onto a winner with that. So challenges. Let's move towards challenges. What are your biggest sort of challenges in this space? Either, I mean, you don't want to talk about client challenges, I'm sure, but in terms of external challenges, is there anything that kind of affects this sector and affects what you do that you're
Yeah,
finding particularly challenging at the moment?
I think for us it's a lot of the planning, not in terms of submitting and getting the approval. It's the period that we're waiting for planning. Sometimes we can predict the usual 12 weeks, but it can go longer. We have projects that have been in planning for 1 year, and it's just like That's for us is probably the biggest challenge. Conveyancing can be as well a bit more complicated, especially if we're looking into where planning is submitted and it depends on the outcome of planning. So that's another one. And then in terms of more like a day-to-day operations, I think budget is it's what really makes or breaks a deal in the way that you need to be realistic with what you're working for and designing for and aligning with the strategy so it all makes sense. And sometimes you kind of need to rein in a little bit of the expectations of the client as well, if this makes sense. Because what happens sometimes is that they start designing for themselves instead of designing for their target market. And whilst I'm very supportive of their ideas, I think we always need to keep the focus on the target market so that we can achieve the highest returns that they want to have on their property. So,
And
so I think those are probably the more challenging.
it's yeah, we find that as well, and I think the less experienced the developer is or the person is with the process, the more that becomes an issue. They get stuck on. So a lot of what we do is external. So we're
Yeah.
looking at the effects of development on trees and ecological features and things. And quite often, particularly with trees, we're like, look, just don't build a tree house there. Don't put your decking there. Move the patio over here. Well, that's where I'd love it to be. And it's like, yeah, but you're just increasing the cost of development. There's going to be planning problems, etc., and people aren't going to want to walk across a wet, grassy lawn to get
Yeah.
to a nice deck. They're probably going to want the deck closer to the house. It's all of these. You're just managing that expectation all the
Yeah.
time, aren't you? So,
Yeah. And
yeah,
I think it's very important, like having, sometimes I do feel with other designers is that they're worried to say no. Saying no can be complicated and controversial sometimes. But we have to say no to certain decisions because we are seeing beyond the decision on the moment. We are foreseeing the next 3 steps ahead. And I
yes.
think sometimes it's better to, like, stick to your no because your clients will thank you later than to just go like, okay.
I think that can be carried across many different business sectors, and certainly all consultancy sectors, is that you know you're paying me as the expert. I've done this 1,000 times. I know what's coming. You don't. Let me hold your hand. Let me make this very clear to you. I mean, we do that all the time. We're not afraid to sack clients as well. So some of our smaller clients that are potentially maybe not as experienced, we'll lay everything out at the start. They'll come to us for one particular survey maybe, and we'll say yes, but actually you're also going to need this, this, and this. Well, my architect didn't tell me that, or the planning didn't tell me that, and it's like we try and explain. Yes, but this is going to come, and that's why we've quoted it. That's why we've raised a hand. We're not trying to extract more cash out of you. We want to make sure that you get to where you want to be, which is sat in your new house, your new conservatory, whatever it might be, enjoying a gin and tonic, looking at the view. And you are not going to get there unless you cross all these hurdles, tick these boxes, step over this. And quite often what happens is when you say no, actually we're not going to do it because you want this and we know that you need that, is that they quite often come back in the future anyway and say, yeah, you were right. So, yeah. Raquel, it's been brilliant having you on. We've chatted away for nearly half an hour there. Is there any key message that you would like to get across to the architects, the planning consultants, the developers that are listening to this when it comes to interior design?
Yeah. To me, design is just not, decoration or making things look pretty. Yes, it does have that component, but that's just like, the frosting on the cake, the cherry on top of the cake. Design starts really early when you're actually looking into a property and looking into how you can make it work better and maximize the space internally and externally as well. And if developers, architects start leveraging design at that early stage, the outcomes of their projects are going to be much higher. The GDVs are going to increase. They will attract the right people coming into their properties. And ultimately, it's going to be a much more pleasant experience, less sleepless nights as well.
Yeah.
So, what not to love about this?
That's absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much. And if the listeners want to get in contact with you, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
We're very active on LinkedIn and Instagram, or through our website as well.
That's fantastic, and I will link all that in the show notes. Raquel, thanks a lot for coming along to this episode. I hope that has been useful to the listeners. I do like to get these guest speakers on and bolt these things on because, you know, we do like to look at planning in the round and development in the round. All these things interact with one another and they slot together. So I hope you found that useful, and we'll see you next week. Raquel, thank you very much, and I'll speak to you soon.
Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.